the shadowy realm of the Lord Keeper's Nook, a secluded antique bookstore tucked into a forgotten corner of New Orleans. Amina diligently working late into the night. This 25-year-old woman with a pragmatic outlook and a skeptical eyes for the supernatural found solace in the dense rows of the time-worn books. The ambiance of the store was thick with a musty scent of leather and paper, a comforting blanket woven with the threads of countless forgotten stories. Yet, as she sifted through the ancient texts, a strange sensation began to unsettle her. The gentle, continuous whispers that once seemed innocuous brushed against her ears with a disturbing intimacy. These murmurs, emerging whenever her fingers grazed the leather-bound spines, carried cryptic messages that teased her mind with a mysterious familiarity. The bookstore, a sanctuary of knowledge, now whispered secrets Amina wasn't sure she wanted to uncover. As the antique grandfather clock in Amina's apartment chimed the arrival of midnight, the only other sound in the cramped, book-strewn living space was the soft, constant tick of its pendulum. The apartment, a reflection of Amina's life, was cluttered yet comforting, filled with the stacks of books and the mementos from her travels. The walls, a gallery of old family photographs and abstract art, seemed to absorb the faint light of the street lamps filtering through the thin curtains. Suddenly, a thud broke the silence, startling Amina from her thoughts. She turned toward the sound, her heart racing slightly. On the hardwood floor, an old leather journal lay open, its pages splayed all out as if they had fallen or been pushed from its place on the shelf. This journal, a dusty remnant of her late grandmother's legacy, had always been a mystery to her, filled with faded ink and pages yellowed by time. With a mixture of reverence and curiosity, Amina picked up the journal. The leather cover was worn, the spine cracked from years of handling. As she ran her fingers over it, a strange warmth spread through her hands, not entirely unpleasant, but unnerving nonetheless. Settling onto her worn-out couch, she began to read, her eyes adjusting to the dim light of her solitary desk lamp. The journal contained entries in a neat looping script, her grandmother's handwriting. It spoke of a lineage of women whose lives were far removed from the practical existence Amina had always known. These women were oracles, deeply connected to the spirit realm, their lives steeped in spiritual gifts and visions. Amina, a skeptic by nature, had always dismissed her grandmother's tales of fanciful stories. Yet, here in her hands lay proof of something more tangible, more real than she had ever allowed herself to believe. Our legacy flows through your veins, reads the passage underlined twice. The words struck a chord in Amina, resonating with the whispering voices she had heard earlier in the bookstore. Could there be a connection? Was it possible that these whispers were not just figments of her imagination, but ancestral voices guiding her? As she continued to read, the journal detailed instructional knowledge, visions, experiences her ancestors had documented, each one a story of strength and enlightenment. The women in her family had been masters of knowledge, a bridge of physical and spiritual worlds. They had embraced their roles as oracles, guiding their communities through turmoil and change with self by the wisdom passed down through generations. Feeling a mix of awe and fear, Amina pondered on her own place in this lineage. She had spent her life pursuing knowledge through books and facts, yet here was a different kind of knowledge, one that defied empirical evidence and required a leap of faith she wasn't sure she was ready to make. The night grew deeper, and the pages of the journal seemed to glow faintly in the lamplight, illuminating words that had been hidden to her before this night. With each page turned, the whispers grew clearer, no longer just murmurs, but voices calling her name, urging her to embrace her heritage. As dawn approached, Amina knew that her view of the world was changing. The journal on her lap was more than just paper and ink. It was a gateway to understanding her true legacy. She couldn't ignore the call of her ancestors anymore. They were a part of her, their blood flowing through her veins, their stories embedded in her soul. Resolved but apprehensive, Amina closed the journal. She knew she had to learn more, to understand these connections, what they meant for her life moving forward. The journey would be unlike any she had ever taken, a path winding through her past, perhaps shaping her future. Amina reached a neglected corner of the cemetery where the fog clung more stubbornly, shrouding the tombstones in a ghostly veil. There, partially obscured by the wild overgrowth of ivy and moss, stood a solitary tombstone, marked with her family's name. It was more modest than she had imagined, worn by time and the elements, yet it radiated a profound presence. As Amina approached, a sudden gush of wind chilled her to the bone, causing her to shiver uncontrollably. The whispers intensified, swirling around her, each syllable clear and commanding. She stood before the tombstones, her eyes tracing the engraved letters of her family's name, feeling a deep connection tethered to her spot. Tentatively, she reached out and brushed her fingers over the cold, rough surface of the stone. The moment her skin made contact, the whispers crescented into a coherent voice, an urgent message echoing in the deeps of her soul. Discover, accept. This first encounter with her ancestors' resting place overwhelmed Amina with a mix of awe and fear. The reality of her heritage, so long obscured by skepticism and rational thought, now pressed upon her with undeniable force. She realized that the journey had laid out before her was one of discovery and acceptance, not just of her family's mystical legacy, but her own role within that lineage. She had made the decision to uncover the secrets and the strengths that her ancestors had left for her to find. Amina stood firm in that cemetery, a solitary figure embraced by the morning mist, ready to embrace her destiny. Days after her eerie encounter at the cemetery, Amina's curiosity was rekindled by a mysterious map she found tucked between the worn pages of her grandmother's journal. The map was drawn in the same looping script as in the journal's entries, its lines sketching the contours of Laura's Keeper's Nook, the quaint bookstore where she worked. The map highlighted a specific spot beneath an ancient frayed rug that laid at the heart of the store. With a mixture of anticipation and trepidation, Amina decided to explore it after hours. As the last light of dusk faded, Amina stood alone in the bookstore. The familiar musty scent of the old books filled the air, now mingled with a tang of possibilities. She rolled back the rug, revealing a dusty wooden floor that seemed undisturbed for decades. Her fingers searched the planks until they caught a small metal latch. With her heart pounding, she pulled it, and a section of the floor lifted, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. With nothing but a small flashlight to guide her, Amina descended. The air grew cooler as she stepped into a hidden room that seemed to exist out of time. The walls were lined with shelves crammed with mystical artifacts and more journals, their spines thick with dust. But it was the far wall that caught her breath. A large stone panel, intricately carved with the symbols and inscription about a key to unlock her true potential. The whispers that had once haunted her now filled the room with an insistent chorus. Discover, accept, unlock. They seemed to chant in rhythm with the beat of her racing heart. Amina traced her fingers over the cool, rough texture of the stone engraving, feeling the symbols as if they were meant for her to decode. Each symbol pulsated under her touch, almost alive, guiding her understanding. The key mentioned was not a physical one, but something deeper, tied to her lineage and the very powers her ancestors wielded. The room felt charged with a latent energy, as if it was waiting for her to claim her place in line. Amina realized that the challenge was not just in finding the room, but in understanding and embracing the vast unexplored depths of her abilities. The journey was no longer just about uncovering secrets. It was about stepping into a role she had been destined to fill. As she stood surrounded by the echoes of her ancestors, Amina knew this was just the beginning of a profound transformation into the truth she had long desired. At the bustling City Heritage Festival, where the air was alive with the scents of spicy street foods and the sounds of local musicians, Amina found herself swept up in the vibrant celebration of culture and history. However, the joy of the festivities was tempered by a fateful encounter that would steer her path into an unforeseen direction. Amidst the colorful stalls and enthusiastic crowds, a man approached her, a distant cousin with familiar features etched into his face. His recognition of her was instant, based on the unmistakable family resemblance that linked them across generations. "Amina?" he asked, a hint of awe in his voice, as if he had stumbled upon a legend come to life. "Yes, I'm Amina," she replied, her curiosity piqued by this unexpected meeting. "I've heard stories about you," he said, his eyes shadowed with concern. "You found the journals, haven't you? You've walked the hidden paths of our ancestors." His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if the words themselves carried their weight. Amina nodded, her heart a mix of excitement and apprehension. She sensed that this conversation was a pivotal moment, one that could define her future. "Be wary, Amina," he continued, his gaze intense. "The path of an oracle is fraught with peril. It's not just about embracing a legacy. It's about facing the darkness that comes with it. Our ancestors paid dearly for their gifts." His words struck a chord within her, amplifying the internal conflict she had been wrestling with, torn between her yearning for a normal life and the undeniable pull of her fate. Amina felt the heavy burden of her ancestors' legacy. The excitement of discovery was now shadowed by the realization of the responsibilities and dangers that come with her newfound role. As the festival continued around them, the lively music and laughter of the crowd seemed distant. Amina stood there, rooted in place, grappling with her doubts and fears, wondering if the path of truth was worth the sacrifices it demanded. Returning to the sanctuary of her apartment after a tumultuous emotion stirred at the Heritage Festival, Amina felt the atmosphere thicken almost immediately upon entering. The mundane comfort of her small book-lined space transformed, charged with an unseen energy that seemed to vibrate through the air. As she closed the door behind her, a chill ran down her spine. The room dimmed as if the light was slowly being drained away, and in the center of her living room, a spectral figure began to materialize. It was both awe-inspiring and a little terrifying, a shimmering entity that seemed woven from the very fabric of the mist she had walked through the cemetery. "You are the bridge between realms," the figure spoke, its voice resonating deeply, not just in the room, but with Amina herself. The words echoed, filling the space with a weighty sense of destiny. "Accept your role, for a great imbalance looms," it continued. Its form flickered like a flame caught in a gentle breeze, yet its presence was overwhelmingly solid and real. Amina, still by the door, felt her resolve harden. The fear that had clouded her thoughts began to dissipate, replaced by a fierce determination. This was not just about her anymore. It was about maintaining the balance between worlds. The legacy of her ancestors was not just to be born, it was to be wielded. As the spectral figure faded, the last of its words lingered in the air, a solemn reminder of the path she had to embrace. Under the ethereal glow of a full moon, Amina stood resolute at the edge of the bayou, the air thick with the scent of moss and water. As she stepped toward the murky waters, a dense fog rolled in, enveloping her in a veil of mystery. The night air hummed with the whispers of the ancient voices calling her name from the depths, voices that felt both familiar and foreboding. With each whisper, the fog thickened, obscuring her path yet urging her forward. Amina, her heart a blend of resolve and anticipation, knew that this was the moment marked a new chapter. As a silver-laden sky washed over her, the bayou's waters whispered secrets, and the voices beckoned deeper into the unknown. This was no longer a journey. It was her destiny unfolding. A call to explore the vast, hidden reaches of her powers and the intertwined mysteries of her lineage's connection to the universe. The world around her faded into the mist, and the path forward was unclear. But Amina stepped into the fog, disappearing from view. The bayou held its breath. The night paused, and the story waited. This was only the beginning.